Hello and welcome to a week 3 edition of the Bleacher Report Fantasy Football Show brought to you by Microsoft Surface. My name is Adam Levitan of EstablishTheRun.com, as always joined by Michael Leone of EstablishTheRun.com as we get set for the third week in the NFL. Michael, how's it going today?
Going well. I have some tables to jump through tonight before the Bills game, but excited to be here first.
For anyone who doesn't know, Michael Leone actually cares about who wins the games. Crazy, I know, but he cares about who actually wins these games. As a diehard Buffalo Bills fan living in Buffalo, if you see someone with their shirt off tonight, smashing natty ice cans against their forehead and jumping into tables, that will be Michael Leone celebrating Bills Dolphins tonight. On today's show, we are going to cover players who will go off in week 3. Could be stars, could be some middling guys, could be some guys thrust into new opportunity, but side guys who are going to outperform, go for 20 plus this week that we like on today's show. Also, we will be taking your questions from chat. If you have a question, feel free to submit it. Don't submit anything crazy. Don't submit anything that you wouldn't submit to your parents, but submit something normal and we'll try to take a look here and give you our best take. Let's go to number 1 in our players to break out in no, I'm sorry, number 5 in our players to break out here in week 3. It is going to be from this Cowboys Bears game, and it is George Pickens. A lot of people probably wouldn't have thought, Leone, that Cowboys Bears would be the premier offensive game of a slate. However, Micah Parsons is gone. I would consider Dallas's defense to be in the bottom 5 in the league, bottom 7 in the league. And this Bears defense, them and the Dolphins might have the 2 worst defenses in the league. And the Bears' entire defense is banged up, including Jalen Johnson. And so we're expecting actually a lot of passing in this game. You saw George Pickens start to break out a little bit in that wild game against the Giants last week. Leone, anything to add here on George Pickens and this Bears Cowboys game?
Yeah, Pickens is getting the opportunities that we hope for in Dallas. He's a clear number 2, but he's getting downfield looks. Had 100 air yards last week, only 52 in week 1, but that excludes, a deep shot penalty that he drew. He also had 4 red zone targets, converting one of those into a touchdown last week. So expect big plays from Pickens, even if the total targets aren't huge. And this Bears defense, we project to give up big plays. In terms of yards per attempt allowed, it's actually these two defenses are kind of advanced DVP stuff has inflating opposition yards per attempt by more than any other teams in the league. We have Chicago the worst. They're dealing with a bunch of injuries. So look for Pickens to get a couple deep shots and hopefully he can convert.
Yeah, I mean, you saw what can happen when you get into wild games with the Cowboys because I don't think they're going to run the ball that effectively. I don't think they're going to defend that well. Let's just drop Dak Prescott back 40 times against the Bears and see what happens. And obviously, that's good for the chance of a George Pickens breakout. Also, Leone, I don't know if you heard this stuff. Like the Cowboys coaches were talking about CeeDee Lamb getting doubled. Like they were in the media out here trying to say, yeah, we know they're going to double CeeDee Lamb. Do you think that was to throw off the scent of the Bears actually doubling CeeDee Lamb? Because obviously, if they're really going to double CeeDee Lamb, that would be good for George Pickens.
Yeah, playing some mind games out there. I'm not reading too much into that. I don't think what they say is really going to affect what the Bears are going to do or not. It is
Yeah.
at least a little bit notable that they might truthfully just expect a lot of double teams for CeeDee Lamb. And, there's 2 ways to go about that. It's to switch things up to scheme CeeDee Lamb to get open and avoid those double teams, or it's to, you know, take advantage of CeeDee Lamb drawing that coverage and giving George Pickens opportunities one-on-one down the field.
All right. Let's go to player number 4 set to go off here in week 3. It is Bijan Robinson. We have the Panthers rush defense inflating Panthers defense inflating opposing running back stats by over 10%. I mean, this is like a historically bad. And we talked about this on the show last week. We talked about James Conner and Trey Benson, who were fine, not great against the Panthers last week. Bijan Robinson is a whole other beast. They're going to be run heavy, I think, for a lot of this season. They're defending better than I thought. And I think that allows them to be a bit more run heavy than I thought that they would be heading into this season. So we have much more Bijan Robinson, Tyler Algier points this week than we do Michael Penix points here, Leone. What do you think about how the Falcons play this game against the Panthers?
Yeah, just to add some more detail to the Panthers defense, it's both volume and efficiency that is leading to this inflation of opposition running back points. We have them inflating yards per carry for running backs at the highest rate in the entire league. And we also have them deflating pass rate at the highest rate in the league, which means more called run plays. So that's perfect for a team like Atlanta that's already primed to establish it. Bijan's looked great to start the year. He had a long touchdown catch in the opener. He's forcing tons of missed tackles. So um, it's tough to envision this game playing out in a way where you don't get 15 plus fantasy points for Bijan with a ceiling of 25 to 30.
Yeah, there's a lot of really good, running back plays this week. We'll get to one other one, but yeah, I mean, CMC, I think, is in a really good spot here. Also, you have Jonathan Taylor in a really good spot, Bijan Robinson in a really good spot. So it is the top of the running back tier this week is going to be very, very much in play for anyone playing in some single day formats. All right, Leonie, why don't you grab that Microsoft Surface from behind you there,
Yeah, let's
and we'll
fire up
go
some chats.
we'll go through some chats because we are men of the people, and we do indeed want to help. First question comes from J Barba One, says Chuba Hubbard or Teteroa McMillan. Chuba Hubbard's usage has been weird. They've been using Rico Dowdle in base more than I thought. But one thing that Chuba Hubbard has gotten in these first 2 weeks has been garbage time pass down work. And I didn't know that he was definitely going to get that. So when you play for the Panthers, you want to be getting garbage time pass down work. Chuba Hubbard has capitalized on that in each of the last 2 weeks. Meanwhile, Tedero McMillan is clearly the real deal, like a actual alpha wide receiver for Bryce Young. I suspect we have this close in projection, Leone. Any thoughts on T Mac or Chuba Hubbard?
Yeah, I prefer T Mac in this one. He's had 9 targets and 10 targets the first 2 weeks, kind of dominating that target share for Carolina, and expect them to be trailing, with the struggles of their defense and just struggle their offense overall. I think it's a better spot to, bet on the wide receiver production and opportunity being there.
Yeah, we do have it very close. I'm just looking at our projection now. In full PPR, we have Chuba point 0.9 ahead here. So very close there between T Mac and Chuba Hubbard. Rich Bauer says Khalil Shakir tonight against the Dolphins or Romeo Dobbs against the Browns defense, which has been playing very, very well. Yeah, I'm curious if you have a take on what's been going on with Shakir, Leone. Obviously, Josh Allen did not have to drop back very many times there in week 2, but even in week 1, it was Keon Coleman going off and not Khalil Shakir. I will say Khalil Shakir's route tree and usage looks strong to me. So any thoughts on Shakir generally? And then what do you think about Shakir versus Romeo Dobbs?
Yeah, I think what we're seeing for Buffalo is, Keon Coleman has emerged as the route share leader for them. Shakir taking a little bit of a backseat there, whereas last year he was their only reliable wide receiver. I think Dalton Kincaid's a little bit healthier, so I don't think there's anything wrong with Shakir, but keep in mind he did have a ankle injury in the preseason. Seems like he's fine, but I think it's more just a healthier Kincaid and a year two Coleman doing well.
Yeah, and up against Romeo Dobbs here, we have Shakir for 11.3 in full PPR. Dobbs, of course, is going to benefit from this Jaden Reed injury. We also have Romeo Dobbs for exactly 11.3 points. So the exact same projection for us on Dobbs versus Shakir here, Leone. My gut is that we're likely to see more volume from Love than Allen, but that could be bad. Take, what do you think, Dobbs or Shakir?
Yeah, I would go Dobbs, just leaning a little bit into the pass volume in a tighter spread game than Buffalo has, and the injury to Jaden Reed just opening up more targets. We already get Dobbs running the most routes in Green Bay. Now the targets per route run should improve when you take Jaden Reed out of the picture.
Okay. Nin, sorry, I butchered that, says Jake Browning, Russell Wilson, or Trevor Lawrence. So people that lost quarterback this week, which could be a lot of people, Joe Burrow, Justin Fields, JJ McCarthy, Brock Purdy. I mean, there are a lot of quarterbacks that are out. They're going to be looking for help here. I'm like maybe I'm crazy. I'm cautiously optimistic on Jake Browning. I thought in 2023, when he got to start all those games, it was 7 games. He wasn't as scared and he was an undrafted rookie. Since then, he's had 2 full years in the system and he had to compete for this job. They identified Jake Browning. Like they weren't like, whatever, it's just a backup, it's no big deal. Given how often Joe Burrow has been hurt, this was an important position to them. And they identified Jake Browning as the guy that they wanted. So I'm somewhat excited about Jake Browning here, but Trevor Lawrence certainly isn't a bad option either. Any thoughts on this one, Leone, for the backup quarterback?
Yeah, we do actually have all three quarterbacks here projected fairly closely. We have Lawrence ahead though. That's probably where I'd go. He's been disappointing the first two games under Liam Cohen, but I think that connection with Brian Thomas, they're going to start hitting on some deeper throws and a higher percentage of his targets are going to be converted into catches moving forward. That's going to boost Lawrence's stats. So I'll go with T-Law.
Hot mic user says, should I start Devonta Smith this week? Well, we need to know who you're comparing him to, but the deal with the Eagles, I think, is just like clear. They have no desire to drop Jalen Hurts back 30 times if they don't have to, you know? And so if they control this game against the Rams, he's going to drop back 20 to 25 times, and Dallas Goedert is expected back too. So I don't love the spot for Devonta Smith, but they're only 3.5 point favorites are the Eagles. And so there's outcomes here for sure where Matthew Stafford plays well and the Eagles get behind. And in that case, I think Devonta Smith is an awesome play. So it's really about how you think the game's going to go at this point, I think, with the Eagles stuff. Leone, any thoughts on Devonta Smith?
Yeah, he's also on one of our models for content that we do over at Establish the Run called the By Leone model, where we just look at expected fantasy points the first couple weeks and which players should benefit more moving forward and have underperformed relative to their opportunities. Devontae Smith's on that list, and that is accounting for the Eagles already throwing at a really low rate. So I do think the pass attempt volume, as disappointing as it's been, as low as it will be relative to the rest of the league, still going to uptick moving forward. So combination of that and Smith taking better advantage of his opportunities, I like him this week.
Okay. Last question here before we get back to our list comes from D Tom 78. He says, hey, crew, Kenneth Walker slash Chuba Hubbard or DK, I believe he's referring to DK Metcalf, in the flex this week. He's got a dilemma. Um, Kenneth Walker, first of all, I would say Zach Charbonnet has a foot injury. If he is out, uh, Kenneth Walker's a smash, right? You're definitely starting Kenneth Walker. But for DK Metcalf, I never thought that DK Metcalf was going to be that great of a fit with Arthur Smith, with Aaron Rodgers. And so I would probably go Chuba, then Walker, then DK Metcalf here for me. Any thoughts on that one? Leone, Chuba, Kenneth Walker, DK Metcalf?
Yeah, we actually have Metcalf ahead of Chuba here. And one thing when I was working through the projections for this week that I noticed was the pass rate over expectation for Pittsburgh has actually been like higher and more positive than I expected with the combination of Aaron Rodgers and Arthur Smith. So I do think that there's more ceiling to DK Metcalf than we thought heading into the season, even though it hasn't come to fruition yet. And that's, a big reason why we have him as against this Patriots defense that we really just don't project to be that well ahead of Chuba Hubbard, where Rico's taking some touches and just a lack of
Yeah.
confidence in the Carolina offense. Wouldn't expect Chuba to, keep finding the box each week.
I do think watching the Christian Gonzalez injury, matters. He's missed the first 2 weeks, and I think that's a big reason, or at least a part of a reason that Patriots defense has been struggling so bad. All right, Leone, why don't you throw that surface back up onto your ledge there? Look at that.
Beautiful.
Let's go back to our list here. We are up to player 3 who is going to break out in week 3, and it is Jordan Mason. So Aaron Jones, unfortunately, is going to miss at least 4 weeks with a hamstring pull. They seem very excited about Jordan Mason. They traded a pick for the right to give Jordan Mason a new contract, did Minnesota. And then, of course, you get this quote here from Kevin O'Connell, who says, I'm not sure we could have much more confidence in Jordan as a bell cow kind of back. I don't think he's a great pass catcher, but we saw him be really efficient in San Francisco running. I don't think this run scheme is nearly the same. Offensive line has been banged up. No Darisaw, and their center is also hurt. So it's not as clean as the spots I think that Jordan Mason had when he was the feature back last year in San Francisco, but it's a pretty good spot, and he gets to play the Bengals here. So I would be shocked if Jordan Mason does not end up with 18 plus touches here against the Bengals. And obviously, that's really hard to sit in fantasy. So, Leone, what do you think about Jordan Mason's chances of going off in his first start for the Vikings here?
Yeah, we've got Mason with 12% of the team's targets, 76% of the team's carries. Obviously a big deviation from the split they've had the first couple of weeks when Aaron Jones has been back there. And that's, as you noted, a really healthy role. It's going to result in a lot of pure opportunities. They're home. They've made improvements to the offensive line. They're running the ball a little bit more frequently and with purpose than they did last season. So I do really like Mason against this Bengals team that gave up some fantasy points to Dylan Sampson and a bad Browns team week one. Etienne and Tuden both went off against them last week. So they are yielding an above average amount of fantasy points to opposing running backs, especially after accounting for the strength of those running backs.
Yeah, and with Burrow in there, it was like more likely that the Vikings would get behind. With Browning in there, it's less likely they get behind, and Vikings can. There's a lot of outcomes where Vikings control the game here, even with Carson Wentz. And Jordan Mason gets a ton of high value touches. Number two on the list, put this one on here for Leone. James Cook. I mean, I'll be honest, before the season, I was like, man, can he really sustain this while playing 50% of the snaps? Can he really be one of the best fantasy running backs in the league while playing 50% of the snaps? If he keeps scoring touchdowns and breaking off 30 plus yard plays at this rate, of course, he's fantasy's number one running back through 2 weeks. This Dolphins defense might be the worst in the entire league. So if you were queasy at all about James Cook, obviously there's no reason to be here tonight where we expect the Bills to score a ton of touchdowns. I don't know, Leone, what do you think about James Cook's chances of finishing as like a top five fantasy running back? It seems impossible for a guy with his role, i.e., Ty Johnson's going to play a ton on third downs. Ray Davis is going to mix in some. But James Cook finishing as a top five fantasy running back with this role, Leone, is it possible?
Yeah, I think it's still going to be an uphill battle for him. You see a lot of games where he's going to have 13 to 15 carries and like two or three targets. And I think it might be tough to get it done, but at the same time, our projections heading into the season like James Cook more than we did when we were doing that type of analysis, where we're like, this looks unsustainable. But our projections, even accounting for those lack of touches, said, the efficiency on this offense is there and that the ceiling is maybe better than you think it is. And I expect him to continue to churn out around 5 yards per carry. And what this Bills team will do, which we saw last week, when they're controlling a game and they're able to run the ball, they won't be balanced for the sake of being balanced. They will really lean into the run when they're able to. So I think it's a great, great spot for Cook. The touchdown probability for him super high. He got up to 21 carries last week, which we don't often see, but he was able to do that last week. Not sure if they'll scale him back on a shorter week, but regardless, the volume and efficiency should be there. But I do think he might be an interesting sell high if we get the outcome that we're hopeful of getting tonight, and he remains the RB1 overall through 3 weeks.
All right. Why don't we leave a cliffhanger here for our number one player who will go off in week three, Leone? So you can go ahead and grab that Microsoft Surface back now. We'll get to some more chats from the people. The Reels Boogie says Drake May or Indiana Jones. I love that we have gone from Danny Dimes to a new nickname of Indiana Jones. I mean, I love Daniel Jones. Anybody who's been following for a long time, Daniel Jones has been one of my guys for a long time. I did not think he's worthy of having two different nicknames. I'm sorry. I don't think you can have Danny Dimes and Indiana Jones, all these nicknames for Daniel Jones. It's just he's not good enough. That said, he's certainly playing extremely well right now. They get to face the Titans. Meanwhile, Drake May gives you the rushing, I guess similar rushing expectation to Daniel Jones. I would say Daniel Jones definitely has better weapons here. Leone, what do you think? Drake May or Indiana Daniel Jones?
Yeah, I thought Danny Dimes here might be a more fantasy viable than expected coming into the year. Did not see him leading the NFL in yards per attempt through 2 weeks. With that said, we do have Drake May projected a bit higher here, and I think a lot of that just has to do with the amount of opportunities we're expecting for May as, like a small underdog at home against Pittsburgh. This Pittsburgh team has, you know, the defense hasn't been as strong as expected through a couple of weeks, and we're really anticipating the Colts establishing the run in this matchup against Tennessee. Cam Ward has struggled. They're taking a lot of sacks, and that's sort of deflating Dimes' projection this week.
Let's go to Lord Gonzo says Marquise Hollywood Brown or Keon Coleman tonight. So Hollywood Brown had his big chance against the Eagles to be the feature back, the feature wide receiver, and underwhelmed. And I think we kind of thought that could happen. Like he is not a feature player, especially at this point in his career. He's better at separating from the defense deep and at least threatening them there. Leone, what do you think about Hollywood Brown here this week and this question?
Yeah, in a full PPR format, I'm still going with Hollywood, even though it was really disappointing last week. It was a really tough matchup against Philly. Um, I'd say that's contingent upon Xavier Worthy remaining out.
Yeah.
If Worthy remains out, it's just tough for him not to get flooded with a high target share. This Kansas City team's playing a little bit desperate. They can't really run the ball. I think they're going to throw a lot, so you should get a bit better efficiency. Now, if you're in like a standard format that doesn't give you credit for points per reception, I would take the upside of Keon Coleman's efficiency with the really high team total for Buffalo, the way he's utilized in the red zone area. I'm just worried about the total volume for Keon in a game where Buffalo is 12-point favorites.
Yep. Let's go to hot mic user Garrett Wilson or Marvin Harrison Jr. Garrett Wilson will be catching passes from Tyrod Taylor, not Justin Fields here this week. Pretty good spot though, I think, for Marvin Harrison Jr. And they're getting some squeaky wheel stuff. Kyler Murray's been getting asked, why doesn't Marvin Harrison get the ball more? Why? He gave an answer that wasn't very inspiring. He's like, listen, Marvin's gonna have some games where he's gonna get 10 targets. Somewhere he's gonna get three. I hope all my guys can get 10 targets. But he didn't say anything about going out of his way to get the ball to Marvin Harrison. But at least it's being put into their mind by the media. Any thoughts on this one, Leone Garrett Wilson or Marvin Harrison Jr.?
Yeah, I think it's Garrett Wilson. As much as I don't like this Jets passing game, with Garrett Wilson getting 30% of the team's targets, and I think Tyrod being at least somewhat capable. It's also a Bucks team. Now we're not expecting Tyrod to drop back often, but it is a Bucks team that will inflate the opposition pass rate a little bit. So I'm gonna lean Garrett Wilson here. I just kind of want to see it from Marvin Harrison first. Like he's been close a lot, but we really have only had one really big game, and that was
Mhm.
somewhat early in his first year, unless I'm misremembering that. And that's,
Yeah,
you know, I don't feel bad with him on my bench right now until I
right.
see the ceiling.
It was really one half. That one half of the Rams game, I think it was like week 2 or week 3 last year. Marvin Harrison went nuts for a half, bunch of broken tackles, but has barely broken any tackles in his career since then. Austin Hasbrook says Travis Etienne or Josh Jacobs. So we're gonna have Josh Jacobs ahead here simply because he actually has a full 3 down plus goal line role, whereas Travis Etienne is losing pure pass down work to Lakeem Allen, and also Bichelle Tootin is mixing in. Which brings me to our next question from HM says Brees Hall or Bichelle Tootin. I get it that like it's not the cleanest spot for Brees Hall, but Bichelle Tootin in some games is going to touch the ball like 7 times right now. Brees Hall could touch a 20 on Sunday. So I think that's a pretty easy one there. Brees Hall over Tootin. Viros F Chick says Laporta or Zach Ertz. Zach Ertz can't keep getting away with this, Leone. He can't. He can't keep getting away with this catch and fall nonsense and scoring touchdowns every week. I can't take it. It's not in me to start Zach Ertz over Sam Laporta. It's just not. But I get why he's asking. Any thoughts on Laporta or Ertz?
Yeah, I would note that Washington was playing from behind a ton last game, and that's the Zach Ertz game script where they're in hurry up mode. He's catching 7-yard passes, falling down like you said, gets the late touchdown. I'm actually pretty encouraged by the Sam Laporta usage through a couple weeks. His route shares at 80% through 2 weeks. He's got a 19% target share. This looks like the guy that led all tight ends in fantasy points. We just haven't seen him hit the end zone yet. And this matchup against Baltimore, It's a little bit riskier for Detroit on the road outside of a dome against a better team, but it also could force them to throw more than they usually do. And if Laporta continues to run routes and get targets at this rate, he really outperforms Ertz from an efficiency perspective quite a bit over the long run. So I think you got to play Laporta. We
Yes.
also should note that Jaden Daniels is questionable for this game.
Yeah, very questionable. Sounds like on Jaden Daniels. Texans fan 254 says Terry McLaurin or Quentin Johnston at flex. So you're probably going to want to figure out if Jaden Daniels is starting before you make this decision, McLaurin versus Quentin Johnston. But if Jaden is starting, I think this is pretty easily Terry McLaurin, given that Quentin Johnston is facing a very good Denver defense and very good perimeter corners there for Denver as well. But we'll see. We'll have updated projection for
It
Marcus Mariota if he ends up starting.
It is crazy. We do have that only 1 point apart in favor of McLaurin with Jaden Daniels in. Would have never assumed week 3 that that would be a legitimate question, but it is because the Chargers have an insanely high pass rate over expectation. They are just throwing the ball with extreme aggression through 2 weeks. And all those targets are being funneled to the receiver position. They're not seeing running back targets. They're not seeing tight end targets. And then the next question we get is Cortland Sutton or Keenan Allen in the flex this week, which is, along those same lines. Keenan Allen's benefiting from Lad McConkey, Keenan Allen, and Quentin Johnston are just like the vast majority of the targets for a team that is throwing at the highest rate relative to expectation in the entire NFL. So I actually think it's still Keenan over Sutton. Sutton saw his routes drop a little bit last week. I don't expect that to stick, but with Sean Payton, you just never know.
All right, couple more here before we get back to number one on our list. Hosborne says, should I trade Pickens, Chase Brown, and Kittle for Bijan Robinson? Man, I get that it's been frustrating on Chase Brown. I get that George Kittle's hurt. These are three legit starters. I mean, you would have to have an insane team, I think, to make this trade. And I'm usually on the side of, hey, let's give up three mediocre guys for one superstar. That's usually the way that I like to play trades. In fantasy, if I can do it, I think that's just giving up too much there. Christian Kinser says Geno Smith, Jake Browning, or Bryce Young. Geno Smith, Jake Browning, or Bryce Young. God, I mean, with all these quarterback injuries, people are going to be in this spot here, Leone, where they. I actually think I'd start Jake Browning here, but what do you think? Geno Smith, Jake Browning, or Bryce Young?
Man, that's a tough one. I think it's Browning or Geno. I'm really worried about Bryce Young. I know he got there from a fantasy perspective last week with the team playing from a desperate spot the whole second half and being able to kind of chip away. But his yards per attempt, even when he was good last year, the second half, it was like a below average efficiency. He was just extending drives enough and scrambling enough that the improvement, even still being below average, looked a lot better than I think it actually was. I know he doesn't have a lot around him, but would note that I think if we get a healthy Brock Bowers here for Geno, they seem to be willing to let him throw the ball a good bit. He has some pretty solid weapons. I think him or Browning would be fine.
Last question we're going to do here before we get back to our list is JLex851 says, am I dropping Cortland Sutton, Calvin Ridley, or Michael Pittman? So he's got to drop one of these guys because he had to pick up Daniel Jones with Jaden Daniels injured. I hate dropping any of these guys. I think Calvin Ridley's slow start has a lot been matchup based. Cam Ward does not look great, but I don't think he looks terrible either. So I'd hate to drop Calvin Ridley right here. Sutton, went from 100% of the routes to 60 something percent of the routes in week 2. If he gets back up to 100%, which I think that he probably will, I don't want to drop him. So I guess I'm dropping Pittman, but God, that sucks too because Pittman is first read on a lot of this RPO stuff that Daniel Jones is running. But I think I dropped Pittman here. Any disagreement, Leone?
No, I think it's Pittman. I do like Pittman, but there's just a clear kind of drop off after Sutton and Ridley.
All right. Appreciate everyone who submitted questions, but we must get back to our list here before we get out of here. Leone is going to prop that thing, that Microsoft Surface, the Copilot. Beautiful. Right back up there. Number one breakout player for week 3 is going to be Teteroa McMillan, rookie wide receiver for the Carolina Panthers. Facing the Falcons this week, but important to note when you play the Falcons, AJ Terrell is a shadow corner who often follows the best wide receiver of the opposing team. Tedero McMillan um, will not see AJ Terrell as he is hurt and going to be out for this game. And so I think that the pass rush for Atlanta's been better than everyone expected. Carolina's been worse than I certainly expected, but Tedero McMillan is an absolute baller, and this is a good spot for him to get going here without AJ Terrell. So, Leone, you just expressed your concern on Bryce Young. Does that flow through to Tedero McMillan here? I think you might be on mute, Leone.
It flows through a little bit in terms of, you want the quarterback obviously to be performing very well for from an efficiency standpoint, touchdown upside. But I do think Bryce might be in this mold where like he's just bad enough for the team to be trailing quite frequently, but just good enough that we can see some outings like last week where when they have to throw the ball, they're able to move it down the field. Maybe not in the most efficient manner, but in a manner that really could stack up PPR points for his receivers. So I'd prefer Bryce Young break out and be awesome, obviously, but I don't think it's a huge hit to Tataroya McMillan's value, a rookie that is going to ascend over the course of the season. Already the clear number one there in target share, 19 targets through 2 weeks, almost 200 air yards, has a couple of red zone targets. So I still really like Tataroya McMillan.
All right. Why don't we recap our list here, Leone? Players who will go off in week 3. George Pickens, this Bears defense, no Jalen Johnson, and a bunch of the other guys on their defense banged up, and they already had a really bad defense. Meanwhile, we are expecting a full-blown shootout in terms of pace and pass rate between both the Cowboys and the Bears. And so, good spot for George Pickens to break out, build off last week's good game against the Giants. Number 4, Bijan Robinson gets the dream matchup for running backs. Every time a running back is facing the Panthers, you want to start them. You want to be excited about them. Yes, Tyler Algier is going to play some, but Bijan Robinson, clearly the featured back and the workhorse, 20 plus touches for Bijan Robinson against the Panthers. It's just, he's going to go nuts. Jordan Mason benefiting massively from the Aaron Jones hamstring pull. I'm not sure that Cam Akers and any other running back for the Vikings is really going to play very much. I think we could wake up on Monday and be like, oh my God, Jordan Mason just played 85% of the snaps for the Vikings and handled 90 plus percent of the running back touches coming up against the Bengals game. Bengals defense here. Vikings are at home. I know Carson Wentz is starting, which is certainly not ideal, but Jordan Mason's going to have a bunch of touchdown opportunities here. James Cook in tonight's game against the Dolphins. You want to start guys against the Dolphins. This Dolphins defense, I mean, cannot stop anyone. And in terms of touchdown scoring, James Cook proves to be one of the best in the entire NFL. And number 1, Tedero McMillan, alpha for the Panthers. Falcons down their top cornerback, AJ Terrell. Really good spot here for Bryce and Tedero McMillan to pop off. All right. That is going to do it for today's Bleacher Report Fantasy Football Show, brought to you by Microsoft Surface. Appreciate everyone being here. Appreciate everyone submitting chat questions. Hopefully this helped. For Michael Leone, for everyone behind the scenes at Bleacher Report, and everyone behind the scenes at ETR, I am Adam. Good luck, everybody.